thought I'd review stuff that we thought we knew about history and time and a lot of things. I really hope what's in some of these books is like true for our world. There's a lot of things in them that I kind of wish were not true, but they are. But some of this stuff is actually kind of going to get thrown out of the window when it comes to the One Piece world. In regards to this, my hand is fine, but I kept getting some typing cramps from my day job, night job, whatever you want to refer to it as. My job that actually pays the bills at the moment. So I'm just wearing this every now and then just to help my wrist not hurt so much. So there's a lot that happened in the last chapter. We got to see Lucci in his awakened form, which is very reminiscent of Luffy's, except there's the black wisps that's actually fur, as opposed to Luffy's white wisps that are flame. So there's a lot going on there. I'm not really going to be touching too much on like the fight specifically. I more wanted to talk about, because other people can like discuss the fight and everything like that. That's fine. I had more of an inspiration to talk about this in regards to certain things that Vegapunk says about the way that the devil fruits or the way that certain aspects of the world seem to exist. So, yeah, let's kind of see how that goes. So, kind of where this starts is, obviously Luffy and Lucci start fighting and everything like that. They both go into their awakened form. Luffy's in Gear 5th. Lucci is in his new awakened zone form and everything like that, which is different than the other awakened zone forms that we've seen. But then again, by technicality, Kaido was most likely an awakened zone. Same thing with Luffy is now an awakened zone. Because the other ones we saw were like, the guards that impel down, and they weren't necessarily, slimmed down the way Lucci is. So we'll see how that goes. And of course, Lucci and Luffy are just like both go, punch fight mode. But Vegapunk, full-on Vegapunk, it like gets up to the lab and he's like sees where Shaka and the rest of them are watching what's going on. And he says, is the White Warrior on screen? Now, it's pretty much safe to assume that by this point in time, Vegapunk has seen Luffy's bounty poster, his updated bounty poster with the 300 billion berries. Is that what it was? I don't remember. The really, really big one. His most recent one. Where he's in the Gear 5th on the poster and everything. So he's definitely seen that one by now, I would assume. I would assume that Vegapunk also just ends up keeping himself, up to date on most of the pirates that are in the New World and in the Grand Line to a degree, particularly on the Yonko's cruise. Also with the fact that he's, him and Dragon are allies, he's definitely been probably keeping tabs on Luffy as much as possible. Whether or not he knows entirely that Frankie was the one that blew up his lab on Karakuri Island is left up for debate, but, you get the idea. So we have them show up and he's like looking at the screen with like the rest of the Straw Hats that are up there, because Jinbei and Chopper are down with Bonnie and Atlas, getting them out of the way while Luffy fights, along with a bunch of the other, civilians that are on the island, the other scientists, and then of course Brook and Zoro are still on the ship to the best of our knowledge, because they haven't interacted with CP0 yet. So he gets there and he's like, oh, so what is this new transformation that he has? Tell me about it. He's telling Nami. She's like, well, we're not sure. To be honest, it probably has to do with one of his Gomu Gomu powers and everything. And Vegapunk basically just straight up says, well, that's the funny thing. The Gomu Gomu no Mi is not in any of the Devil Fruit encyclopedias. So, and I was talking about this with my mom last night because I kind of bounce ideas off of her. She has enough of an understanding of One Piece that she kind of knows where I'm coming from with certain aspects of it. But she goes, so like there's a Devil Fruit encyclopedia, and I'm like, yeah, but the only one of the Straw Hats that's ever actually like seen one, as far as we're aware, is Sanji, and that was when he was a child, and he even stated that he didn't have a huge knowledge of the other Devil Fruits simply because of the fact that the only one that interested him was the clear one that Absalom had, and that now Shiryu has. And like he was the only one that had access to it because of course all the other Straw Hats I guess there's a possibility that there was a Devil Fruit encyclopedia on Ohara, and that may have survived at this point in time. We're not sure, but there's a good chance if any of the other Straw Hats had seen one or read encyclopedia, it probably would have been Robin at some point in time, either via having it on Ohara and she maybe read it when she was a kid after she ate her own devil fruit, or it could have been down the line, it could have been that she possibly found one at some point in time, maybe got information on it from when she was with Baroque Works and stuff like that through one of Crocodile's connections. So out of all the other Straw Hats, I would say that Robin is the most likely one to have read a Devil Fruit encyclopedia. And of course, there's always a possibility that like a more proto version of a Devil Fruit encyclopedia may have been on Karakurt Island, but depending on what lab it was in, it was either blown up or Frankie just didn't pay attention to it because he doesn't have a huge interest in having a Devil Fruit anyway. Because we know that Vegapunk had Devil Fruit like research there as well, and that was before he was in Mads and everything, which we get a little bit more of a backstory on that in the cover page right now, stuff that's going on with Judge and Caesar and flashbacks. But so Vegapunk's basically like, well, it's not written in the encyclopedia anywhere and everything. And Usopp's kind of like, so, but that's what Luffy's always called it. And Vegapunk basically goes into an explanation that, well, what Luffy looks like right now in this form is he looks like the sun god Nika. And we kind of figured that with this arc, you know, after what happened in Wano and everything, with Luffy awakening his devil fruit and everything and becoming, you know, kind of being in the embodiment of Nika at this point in time, we kind of figured that it's during this arc, Vegapunk was probably going to explain at some point what was going on with this, or explain that, okay, you know, 1 + 1 is not adding up here in regards to the fact that Luffy is now a zone, showing features of a zone, as opposed to what it was before, it was just rubber, even if it was doing these very unorthodox ways of fighting in regards to all of his other gears. Particularly Gear 4th. Most definitely would have been a big difference in regards to how he's fighting, because at least with the other gears, it's like he's still like stretching and pumping his blood and everything like that, and pumping his body, but not as, you know, Gear 5th was the big, you know, the big change with that, and then now he's Nika now, or he's the embodiment of Nika. And one of the things is, you know, Vegapunk's like, you know, I speak of a warrior of liberation, whose antics could bring a smile to anyone's lips, also known as the sun god Nika. And so they're all like, huh, well, I've never heard of him before. And again, the only one of the Straw Hats that probably would have heard of Nika would have been Robin. And even then, we know that that's explicitly tied to Joy Boy. And Vegapunk even says here, well, the name Nika was basically wiped from history, probably the same way that, you know, Joy Boy's name was wiped from history, and the Ancient Kingdom's name was wiped from history, that all of that ties together most definitely. Now, Jinbei is obviously not with the group at this point in time, so he's not like hearing the name of Nika from them, because he just fought Who's Who, and that just happened in some of the last episodes. So now we actually have a more, you know, we've got to see some of that animated in regards to, well, the fight between Jinbei and Who's Who, which is cool. And of course, Robin and Black Maria. But for that, it was, which is kind of like good timing here, because now it's like in the anime we're getting the first references to Nika in that regard by name, and then now in the manga we're getting a little bit more of an explanation. So nice timing. Doubt that was planned. But we see some of that. And if Jinbei was up there with them, and it probably will end up being like he might get up to them soon as well, with like Chopper and Bonnie and Atlas and everything. By the way, I like Atlas. I don't think she's dead. Obviously, because she's like a satellite body, she's probably got like a backup system somewhere or something like that, the same way that probably a lot of the other Vegapunks do, the satellite bodies do. So I'm sure she's fine. Well, I mean, she's not fine. Her head got cracked open by Lucci, but, you know, I'm sure everything in there is like salvageable, maybe barring like a couple of the last more recent memories, if she hasn't done like the memory sync yet or not. So she's most likely okay. She just may have to be like reminded that she interacted with the Straw Hats. I also like Luffy's answer of like, you know, oh, she gave us food, so yeah, she's our friend type of a thing, which is by technicality Luffy logic of she gave us food, so she helped us, so we're going to help her. And you hurt her, so I'm going to attack you now, Lucci. And Vegapunk is like, well, he looks like the sun god Nika, this white warrior and everything. And he also says everything that's happened, that goes on in this world is we owe all there is to desire. For instance, the devil fruits. And this, of course, gets the from pretty much everybody around him that's not a Vegapunk. Probably even like Robin is like, what? I think we even get like a look, like a slightly confused or like alarmed look on Robin's face while Vegapunk is like explaining things. Because Vegapunk basically says, well, devil fruits are a manifestation of the desire to see how different paths of evolution can play out. The if only I could, I wish I could, I want, what if I could, all those other, the what if scenarios and stuff like that. And he basically says, all the devil fruits are kind of an example of that, of like a manifestation of that. And then he also basically says that because of the way that devil fruits work, that they are kind of this alienation of nature, as in you eat a devil fruit and you're kind of being, hated and despised and everything like that by nature, specifically the sea. Which, that may lean into the fact that there may not actually be like a water no me, but probably not. We'll see how that goes down the line. It all differs a little bit depending on where Oda wants to go with that, of course. But basically, I love the fact that Vegapunk basically says, well, everything that you see before you, it's not like everything on this island, everything that you've ever seen in regards specifically to like the devil fruit powers, is that all of that was imagined by someone. For a moment, we're going to step back and I'm going to take you into the metaphysical version of this, to the fact that it was just like, by a technicality, the entire run of One Piece and everything, all 1,069 chapters and episodes and movies and light novels and whatever else you want to throw with it, all the SBSs and Viva cards and everything like that. All of that basically equates to, all of that was dreamed up by someone, and that person was Oda. And, yes, by technicality, everything that you see before you was created by someone's desire. The One Piece world was created by Oda's desire to tell this story. And yeah, that's true. That is very true. And that is basically a good version of explaining that. It was just like, everything you see before you was created by desire. And yeah, it was Oda's desire to want to tell this amazingly epic story, even if it didn't start out exactly the way that he ended up intending it to go and everything like that, even with all the different, mistakes that he made along the lines, all these other things that he made along the lines in regards to character decisions and everything like that, and locations and story plot decisions and all this stuff. All of that was all because of Oda's desire to want to tell this story. And, that's basically playing out in front of us now. Going back into the story itself, into the world of One Piece itself, Vegapunk is basically saying, all of these devil fruits that you've seen are all a result of someone's desire to have this weird version of evolution. Now, kind of the thoughts that went into my head with this were, well, some of the things when it comes to devil fruits that are pretty basic powers are, like being able to turn into an element. I mean, like, we haven't seen any artificial Logias yet. We've seen the artificial zones and the artificial Paramecia via the Seraphim now, and via, Momo's devil fruit, of course. But we haven't seen any, Logias yet. If we ever see as Crocodile, that'll kind of like show us whether or not Vegapunk was able to actually have that as an ability, where it's like you can actually have a Logia that is, an artificial devil fruit, and we'll see what happens with that. We have elements of that with the Paramecia, with the Pacifist lasers that are from Kizaru, but even then, it's a little bit iffy on that. So yeah, you have like these, there's basic ideas that come with the devil fruit, like, oh, I want to turn into an animal, and a lot of people say, oh, well, turning into an animal is a fairly basic thing. Just like, oh, I want to turn into a rabbit, or a dog, or a hedgehog, or an owl, or whatever other stuff I have in here. Tiger, saber tooth. different bunny, other bunny, spider, giant black cat, take your pick. Um, you know, this ability to turn into an animal. And it's just like, okay, well, that's, most mythologies around our world and possibly even in the One Piece world have it, shown that like, oh, someone can change into an animal. So that's not really surprising. Then you have more of like the ancient zone. So it's just like, okay, so, the saber-toothed tiger, the mammoth, dinosaurs, other things like that, giant freaking spiders that I want nothing to do with in regards to Black Maria, things like that. Those are more of a like, okay, well, that's a little bit more of like the next step. And then even within that, there's the Logias was like, oh, turn into an element, sand, fire, darkness, trying to think of another one, well, I was going to say Guild Zora, but that's not, he's a Paramecian, he can control gold, so there's a difference there. But, like, even with Paramecias, there's, like, basic things that come with the Paramecia, like, Buggy's Devil Fruit, of being able to be, like, chopped up into pieces, kind of makes you immune to being hurt by swords. So that would be, to a degree, if you're going up against people that use lots of swords and cutting weapons, knives and stabbing weapons, then you're fine. And even like basic thing with Luffy's, you're immune to, blunt instruments, blunt attacks and stuff like that. Bullets, cannons, clubs, things like that. And that's kind of a thing that goes with Luffy's. But Luffy's goes into a whole different area, and I'll get to that. Luffy's in like a lot of the other mythical zones. Even the other mythical zones like Marco's with turning into a phoenix, he has these healing powers. He can turn into a bird anyway. His fire is used for healing as well for the majority of things, but he can probably also use it to like fight because he's had his devil fruit for quite a while, so he's definitely learned how to fight in that time frame by using his devil fruit to various different ways to make it very effective. Same thing with Sengoku and his Buddha devil fruit. There's that. And with Kaido and his devil fruit. And then you get into and then you kind of have, well, I was going to say some of the other mythical zones. I've done some other talks where I talk about some of the other mythical zones. There's a few other ones that are like the bat fruit and the, what's it called? The new devil fruit that is from like the Wano side story thing that Oda wrote for like the 20th anniversary, I think, for One Piece or so. That I talked about. And there's a few other, there's other mythical zones and stuff like that. There's the New Pegasus one that we know that Stronger has on the Blackbeard Pirates and that Katarina Devon has. And, shape-shifting and illusions that Katarina Devon has is, illusions are a fairly basic ability to a degree, considering the fact that there's a lot of mythologies and stuff like that that have gods and goddesses or spirits and nymphs and sprites and stuff like that that can do illusions all over the place, and stuff like that. And so that's not necessarily a surprise, but, and then you have Nika. And when it comes to Nika, the way that Vegapunk is kind of seems to be describing him, which like up until like what happened with, Who's Who, we've never heard of Nika. We know that the sun god itself was mentioned way back in Skypiea in the flashback in Skypiea by Kalgara's daughter, but we don't, we hadn't heard about it ever since then, hadn't heard about the sun god ever since then. And what I'm kind of thinking with this is that, and part of actually what Vegapunk has now said about like dreams and stuff like that, creating things, that actually helps with one of the Uta music video breakdowns for Top Musica that I'm going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. So that kind of like ties into that. So that's going to be very helpful with that in the next couple of weeks. But because I already had a theory about that and this just kind of helps with that. But kind of what I'm thinking is, because like Vegapunk says that like Nika was like scrubbed from history, but we know that the world government, specifically the Celestial Dragons, had not been able to completely erase it, because we know that via the slaves, from what Who's Who said, that the slaves continue to still worship Nika, kind of like in quiet and in their own way and like with hope. So we know that Who's Who had been a slave for a while, and that's where he heard about Nika. Jinbei, even though he had been on Fisher Tiger's crew for quite a while and knew Fisher Tiger very well, did not know about Nika. He knew that, he knew that Fisher Tiger had designed the sun symbol, the sun brand that that a lot of them wore, stuff like that he had designed that to cover up, the mark of the dragon, the hoof of the dragon and stuff like that. And that's why Jinbei has it as like a solidarity show of solidarity and everything like that. And that's why, Hachi has it and Arlong and such. And that, Fisher Tiger had it because we find out, of course, via his flashback, that he had, that he'd been a slave. And that's where I think where this thing kind of goes a little bit is, or part of this goes, is that Fisher Tiger hadn't told any of the rest of the crew that he had been a slave. The only other people he told that he'd been a slave, I believe, was Neptune and Orohime. And that's why he told them that he was like, okay, so I've been a slave for several years. I was captured. I managed to escape. And now I'm back here and I'm free. But I'm going to go back up there and I'm going to cause havoc. And he did. And that's what happens with Fisher Tiger's revolution and everything like that happened there. Him and the Revolutionary Army could get along very well, I think. Considering Dragon kind of wants to do something similar. Also, we know that Hack is part of the Revolutionary Army, although there's no direct connection between Hack and Fisher Tiger that I'm aware of, unless I completely missed something, and I apologize if that's the case. But what my thought is that, of course, that because Who's Who even says, well, the Sun Pirates have like the sun as their emblem and everything, and Nika was the sun god. So is there a connection there or something like that I don't know about? Is that what that comes from? And I think that Jinbei, at the time, he wasn't necessarily particularly interested in that. He just wanted to beat Who's Who because Who's Who was also being very racist at the time during the fight. And I think upon reflection, if Jinbei talks to Vegapunk about this, and he mentions to Vegapunk that, because Vegapunk may not know specifically that like the slaves of Marie Joie and stuff like that worship Nika in secret. But if Vegapunk and Jinbei talk, and he's like, oh, so what do you know about, the sun god Nika and everything like that? Or like, Jinbei gets up there and the rest of Straw Hats are like, hey, he just said that Luffy looks like this guy called Nika, this sun god and everything like that. And Jinbei would go, wait a second, I just fought a saber-toothed tiger that talked about this guy. And like maybe he tells Vegapunk about that. And Vegapunk's like, well, the slaves at Marie Joie, some were raised there, some have been slaves the majority of their life, and stuff like that. And, considering that, slaves, a lot of the slaves probably die there, unfortunately, either by their own choice in regards to just like, I can't take this anymore, and they run and then they end up getting blown up, or they die just from their masters killing them, or however you want to go with that, unfortunately. Generations upon generations of slaves telling the next generation about Nika to give them hope to keep going. There is the question of whether or not Boa and her sisters would know about Nika, considering they were slaves for several years. There's the possibility that they do, but that may have just not been something that they wanted to talk about at the time. Maybe if Boa ends up seeing Luffy's wanted poster, or ends up hearing about some of that, she might be like, oh, wasn't there a story they used to tell us about a sun god when we were up in Marie Joie? Wasn't there a story they used to tell us about that? And that might be something that factors in down the line. But if Vegapunk goes, well, through generations upon generations of slave passing down this memory of, of Nika, excuse me, would it have been that, Vegapunk is like, well, since they passed down the memory, that kind of kept it alive. And we know that the devil fruit itself seems to be fairly or somewhat sentient. The fact that it keeps like trying to run away from the world government as much as possible, even if they, have it cornered. They had it in their possession almost with, Who's Who and CP9, and then Shay still like took it from them, and then like Luffy ended up accidentally eating it. Well, Luffy ate it on purpose, but he didn't know that it was a devil fruit or that it even was the Nika fruit. It's still left up for debate whether or not Shanks knew that it was the devil fruit, although hinted that maybe he did, or at the very least has figured it out since then. But the other thing that I did want to point out in regards to the way that these devil fruit tents work is, like, as I said, Logia's, turning into an element. That's, I wouldn't say that that's like a basic ability, but that's not a surprising ability. And then you have the ones that can turn into zones, and then even ancient zones, and then being able to turn into a mythical creature. And I've read other fanfics that have it like, oh, Luffy finds like the Hito Hito no Mi model Apollo, which, hey, the person that wrote that one, you got pretty dang close there. Apollo is part of the sun god, set up in certain mythology, and part of the Greek and Roman mythology. He's connected to that. But one of the other things is when it comes to the Paramecia, which have so many more weird abilities. There's the Jacket no Mi. And then there's, Suru's Wash no Mi. There's Baby Five's Buki no Mi. There's, Wapple's Munch no Mi. All these other different devil fruit powers that are just very, very wacky in regards to their abilities. Even Doflamingo's being able to make string and then manipulate it and stuff like that. That in itself, to a degree, is a fairly basic concept, because it's just like, oh, you produce this material. Same thing with like the wax fruit, or Katakuri's Mochi no Mi, or Perospera's Lick no Mi. Lick devil fruit. They have these abilities to produce these different substances, and then substances or material, and then they're able to then mold that substance or material into whatever it is they need it to be. We saw Doflamingo make the entire clone of himself, and then make the bird cage, and then like all this other stuff. And then like Katakuri can do similar things like that. He doesn't make like a copy of himself, but he makes like the giant fist, the Pureless donuts and everything like that. And Perospero makes like the giant staircase, and like his other weapons and everything like that, his own arm and everything like that. He's able to use those to be able to, you can make all these different weapons out of things. But then you have Baby Five and the Buki no Mi, and she is able to change her body into different weapons. Turn my arm into a sword or into a gun, change my upper body into like a scythe, and then, Buffalo or someone else can swing me around. Side note on Baby Five. I don't know if I mentioned this when I did the couples video about her and Sai, but I kind of hope that they end up practicing so they can like fight together, kind of similar ways that she used to fight with like Buffalo, so that way her and Sai can work on being able to fight together on the battlefield as like fighting as husband and wife, but him learning how, her learning to turn into weapons that work really good for Sai to use in regards to spears and swords and stuff like that, so that way they can continue to fight together on the battlefield, or possibly help Boo or something like that down the line, if when we ever see them again. Back to this. So my thought when it comes to the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika that Luffy has, and we know that that was specifically tied to Joy Boy. Now there is the whole question of whether or not was Joy Boy actually Nika, or had he just been the one to have this devil fruit previously at the time frame, just before and during, the Void Century. We also don't know if devil fruits existed pre-Void Century, because if they did, then part of this logic falls apart a little bit. But if they didn't, if devil fruits were made like just going into the Void Century, and specifically during the Void Century, by the Great Kingdom, and then possibly like the technology got copied from them or something like that, and then like the 20 kings ended up using that same technology to make their own version of devil fruits, for them to be able to use and fight with. Would there be the possibility that, and I kind of thought of this last night when I was talking about this with my mom, could it have been that I kind of see two main possibilities. One, Joy Boy had already been this very good, like a human embodiment of Nika. Not that he was like the actual sun god Nika in this case, but like that he was like this very good embodiment for Nika, for like what Nika showed with like freedom and liberation and joy and laughter and everything like that. That maybe Joy Boy was this good embodiment of that. And maybe if there had been an actual sun god Nika, maybe he had like gifted Joy Boy this power, this devil fruit, to be able to turn into that. There's the whole thought that, like, oh, were the devil fruits like a gift from like a certain number of gods or something like that. Or were the devil fruits made similarly to the way that, you know, Caesar made the zones, the, you know, the smiles and stuff like that, except, you know, they were a much better crop of things, and they were continuously able to, like, you know, be reborn into, you know, new devil fruits when the former user died. But the other question, the other thought that I had was, what if Joy Boy had actually been Nika? And a lot of people have already talked about this. What if he had already been Nika? Like, if Joy Boy had been Nika, and that because they couldn't, like, always call him Joy Boy and everything, they couldn't always call him Nika and everything, they called him Joy Boy as well. And maybe it had been when Joy Boy was dying, you know, he'd had those powers and everything like that while he'd been alive, and like they fought against the 20 kingdoms and they failed, they lost. And he, you know, took fruit, and then basically, like, when he died, or as he was dying, they put his essence into the devil fruit, and then that devil fruit has been kind of passed down, you know, moving around the world in different places, eventually ending up in the East Blue, and ended up in the hands of CP9, and then Shanks, and then Luffy, and everything. In regards to whoever the heck else would have had the devil fruit is left up for debate in those 800 years. I know other people have theories and stuff like that about who had it, but I'm not going to delve into that. But if it was that that Joy Boy had this power, or maybe he had been the original one to eat the devil fruit, devil fruit, if he'd been the original one to eat it, like they'd made it, that had like these powers of the sun god, and Joy Boy was the one to eat it. And then, you know, he's dying, and because we know that devil fruits change your lineage factor, that when he died, his will, to a degree, part of it was carried on in the devil fruit, and then like maybe it found a safe place, and then eventually, you know, Dragon cannot be the first one in 800 years to have developed a liberation army, a revolutionary army. He cannot be the only one in that time frame to have done so. He's clearly the one that's been the most successful in that regard. But given the fact that they probably had to do cleansings in the past, that implies that there's been other revolutions, other freedom fighters, other things like that. And it may have been that different ones of them were led by someone who had the devil fruit. Or they had been looking for the devil fruit. Like maybe they kind of knew what it was called, or like, you know, the name was lost to history, and then it just ended up being called the Gomu Gomu no Mi, because the government didn't want people thinking that, oh, this devil fruit will turn me into a god. It's, oh, this devil fruit turns me into rubber. I don't really want it. And, you know, so was it, I just have this image in my head in regards to like how all these different weird devil fruits were created, with laundries and jackets and weapons and elements and animals and everything like that. I just have this weird image in my head, and I highly doubt this is true, but I just wanted to leave you with this image of all these people around, like what could have been like, I don't know, the Sunlight Tree Eve or something like that, depending on how that goes. All these people around this tree, and like each one of them holding a fruit, and like each one is like, I want a devil fruit that will turn me into a leopard. Boing, leopard devil fruit. I want a devil fruit that will turn me into a giraffe, because we got Lucien Kaku. I want a devil fruit that will give me the ability to turn into fire. You know, was that the case? You know, I want a devil fruit that will allow me to turn into a jacket. And like, it's just like that concept affected the fruit. Like, I don't know exactly how that works. I'm assuming we'll possibly get more of an explanation from Vegapunk at some point, but I just had that image in my head. It was just like, was it literally just like them sitting around the lab and like thinking, okay, what can we turn into a devil fruit now? Somebody bring me that mirror. Somebody bring me, oh, I want to take someone's shadow. I want to put it into a dead body and make a zombie. What is wrong with you, Dave? I want to part of my soul into this book, and then the book can have its own abilities and mind and everything like that. For Big Mom and like all this other stuff. And by technicality, we've seen the power of what dreams can do in One Piece, what desires can do. Big Mom's desire to try to make a world that she thought was happy and perfect and everything like that is where we get Totland. And then, Doflamingo's desire to have Dressrosa that had originally, yes, belonged to his family, but they left, and the Riku family had been doing a very good job with it. His desire to do that is what caused Dressrosa to become what it is. Another one, Sugar's devil fruit, the Hobby no Mi. Just like, poof, you're a toy. Poof, you're a toy. Poof, you're a toy. Do my bidding and go work in the port. All these weird concepts for devil fruits were all thought up at some point. And yeah, in the metaphysical sense, it's like, yeah, they were thought up by Oda, or they were thought up by someone else, and then Oda used them because like maybe they were on his staff or something like that. But it's just that concept that I'm just like, okay, I want to see how this came into be. Was it just like this giant laboratory of people just making experiments on experiments on experiments of like devil fruits, and eventually this is what we all ended up with? Are there a certain number of devil fruits? Could you make a new type of devil fruit? Not like a new type in regards to like, oh, there's Logia, Paramecian Zone, and I'm going to make, I don't know, something else. I couldn't think of another one. But like, could you make like some, like I made like the chocolate devil fruit. Like I made that one up at one point in time. I made like the photograph devil fruit up. I made the rabbit one from turning into a rabbit isn't all that surprising because like we've seen animals, zones and everything like that. So that not surprising. But like, could those have been devil fruits that you could create? Like, we know that the Great Kingdom was extremely advanced in technology and everything like that, and then that's why like the world is like so underdeveloped at this point in time because so much of that technology was lost, and Vegapunk's trying to bring it back and everything, but world government says no. So is that what happened? And I'm rambling at this point in time, so I should probably stop. So that's what I have. That I wanted to get that on camera. I wanted to talk about that. I know it's a lot of rambling. I'm sorry. I know I went on several tangents. I am interested to see this fight between Luffy and Lucci and to see, what else Vegapunk says about like this explanation as to how devil fruits are created and everything like that. So I am interested in that. And yeah. Could you make a new devil fruit? The sword fell. Now they both fell. Okay, thankfully they're plastic, so it's fine. So, okay, fine. I get the memo. I'm done. Okay. Sorry. Okay. That's what I have. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. Happy holidays.